أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله. أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله. حي على الصلاة. حي على الصلاة. حي على الفلاح. حي على الفلاح. الله أكبر الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله.
إن الحمد لله نحمده تعالى ونستعينه ونستهديه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا. من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له، وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، وأشهد أن سيدنا محمدًا عبده ورسوله، بلغ الرسالة وأدى الأمانة ونصح للأمة وجاهد في الله حق جهاده. وارض اللهم عن الصحابة والتابعين وتابعيهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. Dear brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. The khutbah today, it has a long name, but it has to do with understanding the situation of the Ummah, including what's going on in Gaza and Sudan and other places, in light of the universal laws of Allah. كيف نفهم ما يجري في العالم الإسلامي على ضوء سنن الله في الأمم والأفراد والجماعات. This is a critical topic because a lot of people are confused. Some people are wondering, where is the victory from Allah? And the Quran tells us that there will be حتى إذا استيأس الرسل, and tells us also أم حسبتم أن تدخلوا الجنة in سورة البقرة حتى يقول الرسول والذين آمنوا معه متى نصر الله ألا إن نصر الله قريب. Allah tells us that reaches a point where even the messenger himself and the companions, the believers, start wondering, where is the victory? So an understanding of the universal laws of Allah, Sunanullahi fil Afradi wal Jama'at, helps us understand what's going on around us. And today I will focus on two specific laws that are applicable, and they will help us understand the situation that we're in as a Muslim Ummah. And those universal laws بالعربي سنة التدافع وسنة السببية. The law of checking or pushing back, تدافع, and the law of cause and effect. And to understand how they are operating, I will use for guidance verses from Surah Al-Isra, and if time allows, from Surah Al-Kahf, to basically explain how they are operating right now. In other words, I will try to explain the verses of Surah Al-Isra, especially in the beginning, وَقَضَيْنَا إِلَى بَنِي إِسْرَائِيل, in light of Sunnat al-Tadafa and Sunnat al-Sababiyya. Allah brings our attention to these laws in specific ayat, tells us to pay attention to the qasas, to the stories in the Quran and the parables. Allah Azza wa Jalla in Surah Yusuf says, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم لقد كان في قصصهم عبرة لأولي الألباب. In these stories, the stories of the preceding generations and and nations, there is an example, عبرة. The word عبرة is an interesting word because it is derived from the verb عبر. عبر means to cross from one place to the other. We say عبر الباب means he entered the door. عبرة means an example that will make you understand. In other words, it helps you understand. But also عبير. عبير is the fragrance from the flower comes to your nose. عبارة means a tunnel that takes you from one place to the other. There's so many words related to the verb عبرة. It's such a versatile word. But here it is used as an example. In other words, in these stories, try to understand what's going on. So, من تمام التوكل على الله, I spoke about this in a previous khutbah, that depending on Allah Azza wa Jal requires two things, الثقة بالله والعمل. It requires that we have trust in Allah Azza wa Jal and the ways of Allah and understanding of the sunnah of Allah Azza wa Jal, the universal laws, but also doing our duty, doing our job. And there were people at some point in our history who said, من تمام التوكل على الله, like somebody who's perfectly متوكل على الله, that he could actually go to Hajj without taking any provisions with him. بيروح الحج ومش ماخذ معه حتى أكل. متوكل على الله. Great imams like Ibn Taymiyyah said, no. There is evidence from the Sunnah of the Prophet and from the Quran that says you have aql wa tawakkul, that says you have to enact the laws of Allah, the cause and effect. And there's one particular hadith that I love, and that is لو توكلتم على الله حق توكله, رواه الترمذي, حديث صحيح. لو توكلتم على الله حق توكله لرزقكم كما يرزق الطير تغدو خماصا وتعود بطانا. If you do tawakkul correctly, you will receive your provision just like the birds. They come out in the morning. تغدو means wakes up in the morning and travels hungry. خماصا, the bellies are empty. Comes out, بطانا, bellies are full. But they had to leave their nest. They can't just stay in the nest and say and pray to Allah for rizq. Allah will not send the sustenance to the rizq. They have to go look for it. Subhanallah. So, Sunnat al-Tadafa, Allah Azza wa Jal brings it to our attention more than one place, but one particular place, وَلَوْلَا دَفْعُ اللَّهِ النَّاسَ بَعْضَهُمْ بِبَعْضٍ لَفَسَدَتِ الْأَرْضِ, in Surah Al-Baqarah, في قصة جالوت. In this ayah, Allah says, if it wasn't for Allah having people check one another, and we all know the older generation, people like me, remember the days of the Soviet Union, and how on one hand, the Soviet Union had so many nuclear bombs, and the Americans had so many nuclear bombs, and NATO, and each one was checking the other one. They were all afraid of each other. If one had them, the other one didn't, they would have used them. In the 60s, during the Kennedy administration, we came very close to a nuclear holocaust. And the only reason that it didn't happen is because each side knew that all they're going to get is the first strike. The second strike, the response was going to destroy half of the United States, probably, or vice versa. So for that reason, that's the law of tadafa, or checkmating, at work, as Allah Azza wa Jal intended it to do. And if you look at history, you'll see that the Romans and the Persians were always checking each other for hundreds of years. They were one time winning and losing, and Surah Al-Rum documented this. Alif Lam Mim, غلبت الروم في أدنى الأرض وهم من بعد غلبهم سيغلبون في بضع سنين. Allah tells us about how the Romans and the Persians kept checking each other. Now, we come to Surah Al-Isra. Surah Al-Isra demonstrates both universal laws. The entire surah in its entirety, we would like to think it's about Bani Israel, but in reality, it's about us too. It's about any ummah that follows the way of Allah Azza wa Jal and rises. And as long as they are following the laws of Allah Azza wa Jal and being fair and just, they will remain at the top. The moment they cause mayhem and mischief and they oppress others and their own people, Allah will punish them and they will come down. Allah tells us that this happened to Bani Israel, as we will see in a moment. But in reality, the surah is also about us, because the same thing happened to us. We rose, we became the biggest power in the world. The Ottoman Empire ruled the world practically for 800 years. And before that, the Abbasid dynasty, and before that, the Umayyads. But then what happened? For 300 years, we've been sliding. So Surah Al-Isra, as much as it is about Bani Israel, it is also about any ummah, including our own ummah. And I think there's two ways to understand the ayat of Surah Al-Isra that have to do with Bani Israel. I came across a better understanding, a better explanation of the ayat recently from more than one source, but one particular source is Sheikh Muhammad Musa in a series of lectures he gave at Islamic Education Center in Union City, specifically focused on Surah Al-Isra. Unfortunately, it's in Arabic, and I made him a promise that a lot of the material that he puts out that I like, I will translate into English and bring it to my brothers and sisters who are not Arabic speaking. So the beginning of the surah, Allah Azza wa Jal says, Subhana alladhi asra bi'abdihi laylan min al-masjid al-harami ila al-masjid al-aqsa alladhi barakna hawlahu. We all know this ayah. The ayah after that, وَآتَيْنَا مُوسَى الْكِتَابَ وَجَعَلْنَاهُ هُدًى لِبَنِي إِسْرَائِيلَ ذُرِّيَّةً مِنْ حَمَلْنَا مَعَ نُوحٍ. Then the fourth ayah, وَقَضَيْنَا إِلَى بَنِي إِسْرَائِيلَ فِي الْكِتَابِ لَتُفْسِدُنَّ فِي الْأَرْضِ مَرَّتَيْنِ. And here, many people, including myself, thought that the fasad or the corruption that was undertaken by Bani Israel was punished in the next ayah. فَإِذَا جَاءَ وَعْدُ أُولَاهُمَا بَعَثْنَا عَلَيْكُمْ عِبَادًا لَنَا أُولِي بَأْسٍ شَدِيدٍ. In other words, the Quran tells us that they established their first kingdom, and this is about 400 or 500 years after Sayyidina Sulaiman. So the first kingdom, they built the first temple, and they rose in power and might, and then Allah Azza wa Jal punished them. Many scholars like to believe that the ayah that says, بَعَثْنَا عَلَيْكُمْ عِبَادًا لَنَا أُولِي بَأْسٍ شَدِيدٍ, that it is talking about Sayyidina Umar ibn al-Khattab when he entered Bayt al-Maqdis in the year 615 Hijri. And there is another group of Mufassirin that actually say, no, this is actually talking about Nebuchadnezzar or Bakhtanasar, as he's called sometimes, in the 6th century BC, when he destroyed the temple and he took the Jews captive to Babylonia. I used to believe the explanation about Sayyidina Umar for one simple reason, because the ayah says, بَعَثْنَا عَلَيْكُمْ عِبَادًا لَنَا. But if you pay attention, it says, بَعَثْنَا عَلَيْكُمْ. We sent unto you. To them, they were not there. The Jews were not in Bayt al-Maqdis in the year 615. The Romans had driven them out. There were no Jews in Bayt al-Maqdis. It was the Muslims who brought them back after taking control of Bayt al-Maqdis from Sophronius, the Roman, the Archbishop of Jerusalem. There was no Yahud. So if somebody says, بَعَثْنَا عَلَيْكُمْ, he's talking about you. But if you're not here, you can't say, بَعَثْنَا عَلَيْكُمْ. So that's the first flaw in the first explanation, that it is Sayyidina Umar. Sayyidina Umar came, they were not there. So it can't be Sayyidina Umar. But then they use another reason. They say, well, عِبَادًا لَنَا, Nebuchadnezzar and his people were kuffar. They were infidels. How would Allah say عِبَادًا لَنَا? They were not عِبَادًا لَنَا. Ya akhi, if they were meant to be obedient to Allah and believers, the Quran would have said, بَعَثْنَا عَلَيْكُمْ عِبَادَنَا بِالضَّمِيرِ الْمُتَّصِلِ. Allah would have attributed them to Himself. They would have been عِبَادُ. But the Quran said, عِبَادًا لَنَا. And everything in this universe is عَبْدٌ لِلَّهِ, including the kafir. and nuance here you need to pay attention to in the Quran. There's a big difference between ibadana and ibadan lana. Allah did not call them ibadana. Bukht Nasr doesn't deserve to be called ibadana, ibadullah. He was called abd among abid. Kafir, believer, everybody's abid. Al-hajar wa shajar, everything abdullah, everything you sabbih to Allah Azza wa Jal. So that's the first thing. So I believe it is more like the Babylonians that are mentioned in this ayah. There's another piece of evidence. فَجَاسُوا خِلَالَ الدِّيَارِ. They ravaged, the translators say, the innermost parts of their homes. That's what jasu means. It doesn't mean it didn't say that they roamed the streets of Bayt al-Maqdis. No, they went into their homes. The Muslims didn't do that. The Muslims have never done this in any place. When Sayyidina Umar al-Khattab entered Jerusalem, just like Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, just like Sayyidina Muhammad entered Mecca, وَقُلْ جَاءَ الْحَقُّ وَزَهَقَ الْبَاطِلِ إِنَّ الْبَاطِلَ كَانَ زَهُوقًا. مُطَاطِئِي رُؤُوسِهِمْ, their heads bowed down to Allah Azza wa Jal, doing tasbih, walking through the streets of Jerusalem just like he did in Mecca, harming no one, entering no house. Jasu khilal al-diyar is more applicable to Bukht Nasr and to the Babylonian non-believers, but not to Umar ibn al-Khattab and his troops. They preserved. Umar al-Khattab refused to even pray in Kanisat al-Qiyamah, in the Church of Gethsemane, or the Church of, I forgot what they call it in English. That Kanisat al-Qiyamah in Bayt al-Maqdis, he refused to pray in it. Because he told them, they said, why? He said, because the Muslims will make it into a masjid. He went to the side and he prayed in what is now Masjid al-Aqsa. The point is that Muslims were always very respectful of civilian residents of any area that they entered, included in this one. وَكَانَ وَعْدُ اللَّهِ مَفْعُولًا. So these are important distinctions between one understanding of the ayat and the other. Like I said, I'm now a convert. I believe that this ayah is actually talking about the Babylonian captivity and exiling of the Jews. So then Allah Azza wa Jalla says, ثُمَّ رَدَدْنَا لَكُمُ الْكَرَّةَ عَلَيْهِمْ. We allowed you to have a turn back. In other words, to come back with power and energy. And we see that happening right now. إِنْ أَحْسَنْتُمْ أَحْسَنْتُمْ لِأَنفُسِكُمْ وَإِنْ أَسَأْتُمْ فَلَهَا. So Allah Azza wa Jalla says, when you do good, it's for your own good. When you do bad, it's upon you. You get to reap what you harvest. And then Allah Azza wa Jalla says, فَإِذَا جَاءَ وَعْدُ الْآخِرَةِ, that there shall be recourse. The al-akhirah, ya ikhwa, doesn't mean the second time, because there was a second time when the Romans ravaged Bayt al-Maqdis, destroyed the second temple, and took over until Sayyidina Umar ibn al-Khattab came. Al-akhirah means the last one. The last one could be the second, could be the third, could be the fourth. It doesn't matter. There could be several times in between the first and the last. We don't know how many. The important thing is that there is a last one. فَإِذَا جَاءَ وَعْدُ الْآخِرَةِ لِيَسُوءُوا وُجُوهَكُمْ وَلِيَدْخُلُوا الْمَسْجِدَ كَمَا دَخَلُوهُ أَوَّلَ مَرَّةٍ وَلِيُتَبِّرُوا مَا عَلَوْا تَتْبِيرًا. One last thought in this ayah, that they shall enter the masjid again as they entered the first time. Here the ayah says, وَلِيُتَبِّرُوا مَا عَلَوْا تَتْبِيرًا. لِيُتَبِّرُوا مَا عَلَوْا means they shall destroy what you have erected. And again, as I said before, the believers, the Muslims, do not destroy anything. Only thing I can think of that they may destroy is the apartheid wall in the heart of Palestine that's dividing one side of Palestine from the other. That will definitely be the first thing to go, I promise you. If Palestine, inshallah, or when Palestine is liberated, just like the wall of Berlin was knocked down, the first thing that will go down, that wall that divides families from each other, that runs through people's property and keeps one away from the other. So this is an understanding of the ayat of Surah Al-Isra that shows us two things. It shows us Qanun al-Sababiyya, how if you do good, you'll be okay. If you do bad, you'll be punished. Just like what happened with Bani Israel, and the same thing happened to us. And the other thing, Sunnat al-Tadafa. Brothers and sisters, we are paying the price of not doing our job for 300 years. At the time of Muhammad al-Fatih, rahimahullah, in the year, I believe, 1452, before he conquered Constantinople, he understood the laws of checkmating and checking. He understood cause and effect. He knew that the Byzantines had a big cannon. He built a bigger cannon. He actually recruited the engineer that designed their cannon. He paid him more money, and he had him build a bigger cannon. He had engineers thinking of how to enter Constantinople. If you ever visit Istanbul, have somebody take you on a tour and show you how hard he worked. He enacted the laws of cause and effect. We as an ummah, unfortunately, for years, have relied too much on Allah Azza wa Jal to send us victory without making any effort. Ya ikhwa, everywhere I look, I've been traveling and I've been talking to people of different levels in our community, from tech workers to students to teachers. We are under attack. Make no mistake about it. Right here in America, there's a very vicious attack against our community. Our students are being targeted. Teachers are being targeted. They're losing their jobs. They're not even allowed to have legal representation. If a lawyer comes to represent a teacher who's standing with Gaza or Palestine, that attorney then is fired or has to quit from his law office. They cannot even be represented without a fight. This is going on. What is our duty? Push back. Push back in any way you can. Especially, I say to our young brothers and sisters, you can log on. You can go to CNN, and if they are reporting a flawed story, or if they are reporting the wrong narrative, comment on it. You have the ability to do it. Your father may not be able to do it. He may not be as eloquent as you are. Maybe he's working too many hours. You can do it. Go to the websites and write. That's how you can do it. There's all kinds of things we can do. We can donate to support our brothers and sisters who are losing their job. And yes, many are losing their jobs because of taking a stand for the sake of Palestine and any other cause for that matter. This is what we need to do. We need to understand these sunan and know that victory doesn't come cheap, doesn't come easy. It comes with hard work. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم فيا فوز المستغفرين. Alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi man wala. Another example of qanun al-sababiyya, of the laws of cause and effect, we read in Surah Al-Kahf. We read Surah Al-Kahf every Friday, and we come across the ayat from 82 to about 91, 92, about Dhul Qarnayn. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم ويسألونك عن ذي القرنين قل سأتلو عليكم منه ذكرا إنا مكنا له في الأرض وآتيناه من كل شيء سببا. Allah Azza wa Jal says, they ask you about Dhul Qarnayn. We gave this Dhul Qarnayn power. We'll tell you about him. We gave him power. And the power is expressed here, آتيناه من كل شيء سببا. The word sabab, which means causes and effect, basically. Allah gave him the means with which to accomplish his mission. But that's not the only time the word sababa is mentioned. It's mentioned 3 times after that. And the Quran is not redundant, it has no expressions that are redundant. يعني هيك زيادة بس decoration. لا يا أخي. Every word, every letter, every accent in the Quran is there for a reason. That's kalamullah. So we find in the next ayat, as you will see in a moment, the first trip he made, he went west. حتى إذا بلغ مغرب الشمس وجدها تغرب في عين حمئة. You know, the story tells us that he went west and he saw some people there, and he was given a choice to punish or to reward. And he said, well, those people who did good will reward them. The people that did bad, we're going to punish them. The whole story is he had an interaction with the people in the west. But then before he changed his course and went in the other direction, ثم أتبع سببا. He needed new means, which means that every mission that we want to accomplish requires means. And the means the first time may not be the same as the second or the third time, as we will see. So فأتبع سببا means he acquired additional means. Now the Mufassirin say then he chose a course. Course that does not really fit. The word sababa is not course. The word sababa means means. It's talking about means, resources, people, places, maybe a map to show him where to go. All of these are resources. So the second time, بلغ مطلع الشمس. This time he went east, and where the sun is rising. It doesn't tell us exactly what he did. It tells us that these people, they had no cover from the sun, that they were really in a difficult position. But he didn't. The Quran didn't tell us what he did there. It just says كذلك وقد أحطنا بما لديه خبرا. We know what he did. The Quran doesn't tell us what he did. And then ثم أتبع سببا. One more time. This is the third time. This time he went to a place where he really had a job to do. He went to a place حتى إذا بلغ بين السدين وجد من دونهما قوما لا يكادون يفقهون قولا. There were people who were not really smart. They didn't know what they were doing, but they had a big challenge. Ya'juj and Ma'juj were giving them a hard time. So they said, can you help us? مفسدون في الأرض, they are corrupt people, and we don't know how to deal with them. Can you help us? We'll give you some money or something. We'll reward you. So he said, now the Quran clearly states the meaning of sababa. Now it's all about resources. So the first thing he says to them, he says, فَأَعِنُونِي بِقُوَّةٍ, and bring your men, bring your resources, bring your power. أَجْعَلْ بَيْنَكُمْ وَبَيْنَهُمْ رَدْمًا. I'm going to make some kind of separation, a dam or something, or a wall between you and them. And then he even specifies the material that he wanted. Atuni zubar al-hadid, bring large blocks of iron. Apparently they had iron. He piled it all up. Then he said, light a fire, blow on the fire. He melted the iron. Then he brought copper, and he said, melt the copper, pour the copper. We know now from chemistry. I'm actually a chemical engineer, so I can tell you this from knowledge. When you mix copper and iron, you make a molten mix of them, you mix them together, the resulting metal is much stronger than each one separately. SubhanAllah, this is one of the miracles of the Quran, something we didn't know until very recently. So he tells them to mix the metals, and now he built the gap between the two mountains. And it's over. He protected them. He just built the dam, and now they are protected. So the point I'm trying to say here is that the Quran in Surah Al-Kahf tells us that no matter how powerful somebody is, you have to constantly acquire power that is suitable for your circumstances. We live at a time, ya ikhwa, where knowledge is power. Resources are power. Money is power. Technical knowledge, scholarly knowledge, everything is power. We need to acquire it, and we need to use it for anything, for our own protection. I hope and pray to Allah Azza wa Jal that you heed my advice and that you understood the message. Allahumma ya Rabb, man arada bil-Islam wal-Muslimina khayran fawaffiqhu ila kulli khayr. Allahumma ansur al-Islam wa a'izz al-Muslimin wa ali fadlika kalimat al-haqq wa din ووفقنا لما تحب وترضاه يا رب العالمين. اللهم من أراد بالإسلام والمسلمين خيرا فوفقه إلى كل خير، ومن أراد بالإسلام والمسلمين سوءا فأخذ أخذ عزيز مقتدر. عباد الله، إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون. اذكروا الله يذكركم واستغفروا يغفر لكم. وأقم الصلاة.
الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح. قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة. الله أكبر الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله. We have صلاة الجنازة after صلاة الجمعة.
استقيموا واعتدلوا وثابني وثابكم الله. الله أكبر. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، الرحمن الرحيم، مالك يوم الدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين، اهدنا الصراط المستقيم، صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. آمين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، الرحمن الرحيم، مالك يوم الدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين، اهدنا الصراط المستقيم، صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد، لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله.
يا كريم.
استقيم عم. صلاة الجنازة 4 تكبيرات. أفتر فيرست تكبيرة قراءة سورة الفاتحة. أفتر سكند تكبيرة الصلاة على النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم، تشهد. أفتر ثيرد تكبيرة الدعاء للميت. أفتر فورث تكبيرة الدعاء للمسلمين والمسلمات الأحياء والأموات. الله أكبر. بسم الله. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. اللهم اغفر له وعافيه. اللهم جازي الله أكبر. اللهم لا تحرمنا أجره ولا تفتنا. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله.